Well, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. I firstly must congratulate all of you here today for seeing the whole conference through. Top marks to all of you. It's my closing address, and aside from the customary thank yous, which I think are vitally important, I'd like to flag 2 or 3 issues from each of the sessions, almost as takeaways. It won't be very long, but I hope you'll find it a very useful summary of the conference. But before I start, I'd like to thank Andy and the team from GRV Global. This to me is a unique, intimate African conference. It's where you listen to some really high quality speakers, have great discussions, and have some really in-depth, detailed networking opportunities, something which you can't have at the Cape Town Mining Indaba and elsewhere. And in fact, here we had 14 African countries represented, which I think is stunning, in addition to leadership from the African Union. So it had a very, very strong African representation. The positioning of the conference in terms of where we are now in the mineral cycle was also particularly important. As I mentioned in my introduction this morning and yesterday morning, the gold price is beginning to go up following a period of political instability, and typically silver and other commodities actually follow it. So we could well be on the verge of a commodity boom. Saying that if we look at the Fraser Institute study from 2018, Africa as a continent is the second least attractive investment destination in the world. But us all being here witness the fact that Africa should be the first, and I think it should be. We have the potential to do that, and it's within our grasp to actually make that potential. So yesterday morning, ladies and gentlemen, we kicked off with a ministerial session. It was a wonderful session, as it always is, and the ministers rose to the challenge of speaking for 3 minutes apiece on each subject, which I was delighted with. And the 3 key messages for me in this particular address was: Africa is open for business, there's a wealth of mineral resources across Africa, and vitally important, the African Union are coordinating the legislation, the policies and the procedures in order to achieve 2063. I'm going to pepper some of my comments in terms of some rather maybe perhaps tongue-in-cheek action points. 2063 is a very long time away. You know, perhaps we need to kind of expedite that so we can really take leadership on the world stage. We then moved on to mining finance. We can do nothing, actually, without money. So it's probably very apt that following the ministerial session, we had a session on mining finance. We had another wonderful panel there with many different creative ideas. And the 2 which stuck out for me, which are very uncommon in the mining industry, are using crowdfunding and blockchain. That's something I'm certainly going to take away and look at in some detail. I do know in Canada that crowdfunding has taken off in terms of funding exploration projects, and there is a junior called Red Cloud, if I remember correctly, which actually markets crowdfunding products into the junior sector. We then had a coal session, and we all know that the coal price is quite depressed at the moment, but we also all feel that coal will remain a strategic mineral for Southern Africa and perhaps even the world. And is there not an opportunity here for Botswana to take a country competitive advantage here by building a very large power station and feeding into South Africa as the woes of Eskom continue? Is that not something the country might wish to do as it looks to diversify away from diamonds, which is probably a very important thing? And yesterday afternoon, many of us here were in the matchmaking session. I think I did 16 sessions for 4 hours, and I found it very, very interesting. Learned a lot of new things about particular products and such. And one was particularly surprising for me, was that of snakes. And I work in an area where there are abundant snakes, whether it's the Central Kalahari of Botswana or the Thorny River project east of Mokopane, and I go armed with my snake gaiters and elsewhere. But I realized I need to be educated more about snakes, because indeed, as we all know, they can very easily kill you. We then started the session this morning with a junior mining session, and again it was actually a lovely robust debate there, and we concluded a number of different things. Firstly, as we all know, that junior miners are the engine of growth. This is where new discoveries will typically come from, and then either the juniors are lucky enough to raise money and develop the mines, or they get bought out. I'm a firm believer, and Mr. Malloy and Chaka Malloy endorsed this as well, that new deposits are there to be found. It requires different thinking, an innovative approach, an understanding of historical context as why they were not discovered before, and of course, a high degree of innovation. Then we've looked at what can governments do. So of course, there is much the private sector can do, and there are much that finances can do. My first call would be perhaps for Botswana, Zimbabwe, and Namibia to waive the royalty on diamond taxes. I'll give you one small example of this. We did an exercise by putting a primary diamondiferous deposit in Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, South Africa, Eswatini, and Lesotho. And interestingly, the country which had the greatest commercial returns was South Africa, because it has the lowest royalty. And if you're looking at a project with only a 20% return, you will kill that project if you give 50% of it up front to the government immediately. I'm being a little bit provocative here. I'm not normally, but I am going to be. The second point I'd like to raise, and I think that we have enough ultra-high net worth individuals here in South Africa, and I know there can be in many other parts of Africa, for there to be tax incentives for individuals and groups to invest in exploration itself. It's been done elsewhere in the world, it can certainly be done in Africa. And finally, we touched on the issue of sovereign wealth funds, and where governments take strategic interests in companies which they view are important in terms of that particular commodity or that particular region in terms of its development. And I'm directly facing the Minerals Development Company of Botswana, which is an example of that here in the continent. And then finally, a discussion on incubators. Why are there so few in the mineral industry across the world? Whereas you go to the biochemical industry, the information technology industry, you see these in abundance. Then technology, and I'm going to touch on technology twice because we covered it twice in the agenda. The fourth industrial revolution is actually with us right now at the moment, and this provides huge potential, not only in terms of new discoveries. Now, I'd just like to share an interesting thing with you. There's a company called Orezone in Canada, and they won a competition for finding gold mines using big data and various algorithms to look for gold mines. This company, Orezone, was listed, and you can upload your data to them, and theoretically they'll find your mines for you. It's not as simple as that, but it could certainly help in terms of finding new discoveries. But I'd like to add in parenthesis, there is no substitute for boots on the ground at the end of the day. And of course, technology can help us significantly lower operating and capital costs safely and in a more sustainable manner as well. However, I'm going to add a very, very big however, because that led into the next discussion around governance and sustainability. And this was raised by Mr. Malloy as well, and many others. How can we do all of this where we can actually increase employment at the same time, and in particular where we can increase employment amongst the youth of the country? Because this will be a problem for the various countries as we go forward. I'd just like to add a small comment on that. How can we attract the youth into the mining industry itself? Often people think the mining industry is a dirty industry. You know, it's not sexy like IT or finance. You're not in Joburg, Gaborone, or Cape Town. You're out in the middle of the Kalahari, in the middle of the rainforest of the DRC. We need to attract the world's best talent, Africa's best talent, into the industry itself. So we vitally need to be able to balance the needs of all of our stakeholders, and this came through very strongly: the government, the communities in which we live, the suppliers, and of course our shareholders. And of course, you know, we had a magnificent dinner last night hosted by Botswana, which is probably a model example of how to balance all that together. But at the same time as that, one needs to allow room for mining entrepreneurs to be nimble, to flourish, and to deliver those new discoveries. So often one needs to look at possibly two separate sets of legislation. to deal with those large companies which are sustainable and will keep going, and those where you can incentivize to find those new discoveries before they eventually grow up, for want of a better word, and develop into a larger mine. This afternoon we'll witness to just a small snapshot of the many different activities which are taking place in Africa: coal, gold, iron ore, battery metals, copper, manganese, and a whole load more. And from what we heard, there is still much to be found across Africa, but it needs innovation, it needs financing. What also kind of struck to me as well is the importance of battery metals going into the future. Lithium, nickel, and actually many others. You saw Tony's slide in terms of a massive increase in methane and nitrogen oxide, which is very worrying. So you can see that battery metals is going to be a great future, and let Africa kind of take that. Moving on to the supply chain. The supply chain touches every aspect of a mining company, I understand, and I truly believe it. But an important comment came out here too as well, and it's not something we've actually spoken about very much at this conference, and probably rightly or wrongly so, I'm not going to make a comment, and that is corruption. But the panel said it takes two to tango. It's not just one person who delivers corruption, there are two people actually on either side of the fence. We then talked about the future revolution in the final session, absolutely fascinating. And two things I drew from this were the fundamental importance of digital infrastructure to make the fourth industrial revolution work. If you don't have that digital infrastructure, it's probably not going to work. And I'd fully like to endorse the chairman's view. Not only are there opportunities in terms of lowering costs, environmentally, sustainably, safely, as well as finding new discoveries, but there is a huge opportunity in terms of metallurgical breakthroughs. He mentioned the fundamental work he had done with Randgold in making Tongon and others economic. I was involved with the development of the first autogenous mill in southern Africa for diamond processing, which has made Lucara part of what it is as well, by safely lowering the operating costs and recovering diamonds which are not broken through their fantastic mine in northeastern Botswana. A conference like this is never possible without the sponsors, and you can see these wonderful companies actually behind me: the platinum, the gold, the silver, the bronze, airline sponsors, coffee show, cultural dinner, and communication. These are so important to enable all of us to kind of gather together, government, public sector, private sector, to come under one roof and celebrate this African conference. So on behalf of myself as the conference chair, I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming here and supporting it. So please, a big round of support for the sponsors. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank the speakers, chair, and most importantly, all of you. In fact, especially all of you who've remained to the kind of bitter end at 5 o'clock this afternoon. I hope the conference has been valuable to you. You've taken away some interesting nuggets of information. You've met some interesting people who you'd like to actually follow up with. So I hope to see you again this time next year. The dates are in the conference program. May you have safe travels, and God bless.